Please, have a seat, have a seat. I can tell this is the moderator's chair because I have this little sign on my microphone, so the rest of you don't have that. So thanks everyone for coming back after lunch for our panel. I'm sure we're going to have some interesting conversations about Open RAN and what it's all about. Before we get started with the questions, I thought I would just give all of our panel members an opportunity to introduce themselves and their organization, say a little bit about how you come to be here today. So we'll start with Mr. Stevenson.
Thanks, Ted. Bob Stevenson, you heard my long title. I work for Commander U.S. Pacific Fleet, which is the Navy's largest warfighting fleet. Our ships and sailors constitute about 60% of the entire U.S. Navy. Our area of operations basically goes from the Mississippi River in the middle of the United States to the east coast of Africa. So I have two hats. I have an operational hat and I have a CIO hat. So I'm going to give you two use cases today to talk about how I've used Open RAN as a CIO, how I hope to use it as an operational task force.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Ko. I'm with Taiwan Mobile. I'm currently an advisor to the President's office. Shortly before that, like back in April, I was the CTO of Taiwan Mobile. I've been in that position for a few years. And if we rewind further, I spent maybe 2/3 of my career in the vendors community, and for the last 1/3, I'm serving for the operator. And I was responsible for network architecture, vendor selection, network deployment, and all the messy operations and maintenance stuff. So I'm really glad to be here to share our thoughts about Open RAN. It's a really exciting topic. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Luke Wang. I'm from Far Eastern, and I'm with Network Technologies and Operations Division in charge of Enterprise Network Solutions Planning and Operations. It is my pleasure to be here to join the discussions on Open RAN. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Raymond Pao. I'm from HTC Business Solutions. My role is the business development lead for HTC GRANs. GRAN is HTC 100% owned subsidiary and focus in the Open RAN software architecture. Our software is focused in the CUDU area, and in Taiwan, we are doing the end-to-end integration solutions since we have bandwidth here. But I mainly focus in the US and Europe right now. And outside US, our focus will be the software stack, and we want to work with partners, system integrators to bring the Open RAN to have more use cases and also adoption. I think it's very exciting to see many friends and partners here, and look forward for the forward.
Great, thank you. Thank you all very much for that. The next topic, the first topic I wanted to get into here with the panel was just in general, when you're considering bringing a new solution into your systems, what the requirements are when you choose to evaluate those, and what your evaluation process for that would be. So this would be sort of general, independent of whether it was an Open RAN solution or any solution at all. That might be interesting for the audience to hear, sort of how do you bring in new technologies into your environment. So let's start, maybe start in the middle with Tom from Taiwan Mobile, if you were doing this.
We're talking about Open RAN, and there are definitely two tracks for Open RAN. One is in the enterprise market in private networks. The other is in the public network in the mobile broadband kind of the environment, right? To say the least, I think there are two totally different classes of products. And obviously, for the enterprise market, the requirements could be a lot simpler, and it could be a lot easier to test and validate and deploy because of the environment. But because of each private network environment is different, and what they need are also different in terms of the capabilities that needs to be in the RAN. So those would be criteria that needs to be validated. So I think for that class of products, things like the TIP badging process would be very useful. In fact, our company has adopted the process so that any vendor who needs to sell equipment or enter our doors, we would advise them to pass the badging process first. Okay, so good job, TIP. But for the public network, it's a totally different class, which is very, very difficult. I think everybody here probably has followed Open RAN for many years. So at the beginning of Open RAN back in 2020-ish, right before COVID starts to ramp up, I actually went to Rakuten and talked to Tariq when he was the CTO there. And we also followed Open RAN deployments all over the world. It looked like the deployment has been a lot slower than what people have imagined. So I think the question was, what's the criteria for evaluating or what are the requirements for that class of products? It could be very, very complicated. I could spend many, many hours talking about functions, features, performance, stability, and so on. But I think for most of the tier 2 and tier 3 operators in the world, the criteria is actually very simple. If you got deployed in tier 1 networks, that's the ticket to enter into our network. So basically, we look at you as a very qualified vendor. Your gear has been in use in many, many different network operators' networks, and that's a simple ticket.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Sort of a reference customer kind of perspective. If somebody else has already tried it, then maybe I'll try it. So let me shift to Luke and give him a chance to address that, and then I'm going to come back to Mr. Stevenson for his perspective on what does it take to be evaluated in your solutions, and then we'll close up at the end with Raymond.
Thank you, Ted. The mission of my department is to support enterprise business unit to develop network businesses. So the most important requirement when we evaluate a new solution is that it has to fulfill business needs, both technically and commercially. And during evaluation, we review hardware specifications, of course, and software features. And we also examine how to implement the solution in the fields and do operations and maintenance after it is up and running. And we check the vendor's professional services capability. We test the solution in our lab. And then we specify application scenarios for the vendor to quote accordingly. And if a solution passes our evaluation, we put it in our portfolio. Then when business opportunities come, we choose the most appropriate solution from the portfolio based on business requirements. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, that sounds very sensible. Bob, something you'd like to offer on that?
Yeah, we don't go shopping generally for a particular kind of technology. We have capability gaps, and then it's the job of myself and my staff to identify technologies that fill those capability gaps.
I think your mic might be off. I'm not sure. Up. There you go. I'll swap with you.
Okay. I'm the narrator.
You get the sign.
Okay, trying again. So we start with capability gaps that we identify. We are constantly looking at our operations. When there's an operational failure that is indicative that we have to apply technology, we start looking. We frequently don't. We're looking for things that meet our requirements, not necessarily a particular technology, but one kind of leads to the other. Big thing for us is cybersecurity. We use our networks for classification, for classified information. So if it's going to come into our network at some point, we have to test the system and make sure it complies with Department of Defense cybersecurity. That's our immediate first step. After that, we look at suitability for purpose. We obviously do a lot of work in the maritime environment. There's some very specific things we have to do, especially if it involves going aboard ships. We have to look at not only space, weight, power, air conditioning, all the normal stuff, but we also have to be careful about radiation because we have a lot of things on our ships that radiate, and we want to make sure that what we add to a ship doesn't break something or cause problems. But interesting for me because one of my jobs is I'm the final authority of what gets installed on a ship. So I'm accountable. If I put something on a ship and it breaks, it's my fault, and I have to deal with it. But other than that, and the other problem is I don't have a lab, so I have to rely. The services have laboratories that we use to do our testing for us. A lot of my team works for the Naval Information Warfare Center. Their direct support to me. We use their facilities and their engineers to do the testing for suitability. So it's a little more convoluted because of our requirements. But like I said, when I did my 5G deployment, I did not say I think I'd like to do Open RAN. I said I have a base in an isolated area that I need to improve the telecom, and it needs to have these feature sets. And the Open RAN solution presented itself, and what we ended up going with.
Okay, we can swap. I'll swap back. Yeah. Down here at the end, Paul, Raymond, would you like to say something about this?
Okay, so we actually, as a solution provider or software stack provider, but lots of our customers, they share what their decision process, or I can share a little bit. So basically, our focus starting from two areas. Well, from public network or carrier side, I think what we can do is we try to fulfill the requirement from the carriers. They want us to go to the lab, and then we will go to the lab to get the certificate, and then we can be part of the vendor list and portfolio. So later on, when they have the business opportunity, we are capable to take it. But in the enterprise side, that we usually engage with the customer directly. Our customers, first of all, they want to tell us their applications. I think most of the enterprise, they are application driven. They have their specific applications, maybe some camera, maybe HEV, maybe VR, AR. So based on their applications, they will compare the couple different technologies altogether, compare their technical specs, also their total cost and operating cost. All these are their considerations. So most of the time, when they choose Open RAN, they will not only consider the price itself, but also the operation cost and also the management effort, and maybe for 3-4 years, how does it cost for the end-to-end. For the process, evaluation process perspective, what we're seeing is pretty normal. They want to get some POC first, maybe set up a lab, a very small scale trial for 3 months to 6 months, and then they will start to really think about the commercialization opportunity. So this is what we're seeing, how it works in the enterprise segment.
Sure, thank you. So I want to move on to the next question, which I think is an interesting one, which is a use case question, which is, are there particular use cases that you think would encourage wider Open RAN adoption than we're currently seeing? And I'm very interested in your perspectives on that use case question, and then then after that we'll talk about whether we see any gaps about that. So I think maybe start off with Mr. Stevenson, and then tag team it down the line here from Tom and Luke.
Okay. Thanks, Ted. Didn't break the mic this time.
No.
So I have two use cases for you. I talked about bases. We have them throughout the United States and overseas. We use them to support either our aircraft or our ships. And so when the DoD 5G program started, my use case was aviation maintenance. Keeping airplanes flying is pretty challenging. The Department of Defense really kind of took a different approach from aviation maintenance than the commercial industry did. And so when we, several years ago, it was identified the fact that a large number of our airplanes weren't flying because they were broken. So that was our task. So the Navy had been working on it. They'd brought in a group from the commercial aviation industry, and they had just gotten to the point where they'd come up with all the process changes, but they realized that our IT was, to use a technical term, rubbish. So we came along at the right time and were able to go into two bases. One was a joint base, Pearl Harbor Hickam, which is a combined Navy Air Force field, and then we did a second base at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. Whidbey Island is where we base our long-range maritime patrol aircraft out of, and also our electronic warfare aircraft. So we had a pretty interesting mix of technologies, and we initially went after maintenance things to do maintenance, things like automated inspection of turbine engines, the ability to provide virtual references to mechanics working on the jets and stuff like that. But we expanded beyond that into things like physical security. We want to keep people off the runways and away from our stuff. These bases are pretty large and they're in desolate areas, so we employed 5G and edge computing to host artificial intelligence to do our surveillance. So we discovered that the AIs tend to have better attention spans than some of our security forces, so that was an immediate improvement. We also use it for a pretty mundane thing. Gas turbine engines are prone to suck up bits of things that are on the runway. We spend a lot of time with human beings out sweeping the runway looking for little bits and pieces. We found again that we could build machines with artificial intelligence that could go do that. By using 5G technology, we could do all the processing in the hangar and then put bigger batteries in the robot. So those have been successes to the point where I think the base CO has a standing order. If I go on the base and try and take the system out, they will not let me on. It's been a success. We're looking for 5G to improve our communications infrastructure. A lot of it's old, and really we want to jump straight to the 21st century. So, hoping to undertake that. The second thing has to do also with unmanned vehicles. We're enormously interested in use of unmanned vehicles in wartime applications, and this is another thing in certain areas where we think 5G technology will be a critical enabler, because of the resilience. And again, all the things we talked about this morning that make it desirable are things that we think we need to do. So we are actively working with a whole lot of different agencies on an experimentation program. You might have heard of, we have something called the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU. Assistant Secretary of Defense announced a big initiative called Replicator. Replicator is the United States is trying to build unmanned vehicles at scale. We see Open RAN technology as being critical to how we want to command and control these things. Although we're building vehicles that have a lot of autonomy, we think we still need to be able to control them. And that's what we've been experimenting on that now for about a year. We're about to try and come up with the final architecture so that we can, as we deploy these vehicles, we'll be able to operate them in adverse environments. So one's very business-like. Again, I'm a CIO. The other one has a much more deadly purpose as we're trying to use it to do potential combat operations. I know if you follow what's happened in Ukraine, where it's been basically unmanned vehicle warfare, and we're seeing it again in the Red Sea right now, where the Houthi are employing unmanned vehicles against us. So we're developing technologies to defend against those kind of attacks, and also to employ them in support of our operations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. I think that reflects a lot on some of the discussions that we had this morning about 5G applications being, enhanced mobile broadband, but beyond enhanced mobile broadband. So these were things that were promised, with what 5G was going to bring, and you can hear Mr. Stevenson talking about interest in being able to deliver some of those things. And I'm curious if Tom and Luke have a similar, story about, what use cases do you think, in your case, would encourage wider Open RAN adoption. So let Tom take that, and then we'll go on to Luke.
Okay, thanks, Ted. So, like I said, enterprise and public networks are totally different animals, right? And the use cases are so different. So for every enterprise deployment, we have to look at the total requirements and the whole package, because RAN is only connectivity and maybe some advanced capabilities supported by 3GPP and so on. So that's only a small portion of the total solution we need to integrate and provide to the customers. So I wouldn't say there are so many use cases that would really drive O-RAN adoption in the private networks. But like I said, we have to evaluate as a whole what the business owner or enterprise or agency is needing. But concerning the public network, really it's simple. There's no fancy business, no fancy use cases that we're looking for. We're simply looking at it doing exactly the same as what we have today from the legacy vendors, or at least close enough to it. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, it's working.
Got it.
Actually, we have been using Open RAN in the fields, but our primary solution is still traditional RAN for both public network and private networks. From our experience, traditional RAN has been well serving all the use cases that can be supported by 4G and 5G now, including those for private networks that require customizations. On the other hand, in our case, Open RAN is used only for private networks. We started looking into Open RAN 4 years ago by collaborating with local vendors. Then everyone knows that Open RAN is still on its way to maturing. So we use it only for private networks, and we take the opportunities to see how it performs now and how it will improve and evolve. Right, so that's basically what we are doing. So I agree with Tom that it's not really about what kind of use cases that can be supported by Open RAN. To be honest, Open RAN is another type, another architecture of RAN, right? So if we, as an operator, I admit we are conservative, but since we have been using traditional RAN to run our business quite well, of course, we will be open to see the possibility of other technologies, including Open RAN, but we will not do anything that will risk our business.
Sure, that's a really interesting point. Raymond, maybe you have something to offer from the perspective of use cases that your prospective customers are expressing to you, of things that they really want to do that you think are a good match.
Yeah, I think we have a couple customers that have different applications, so maybe I can share their thought. The first customers is the doing the police training. So they are doing team-based training for like terror attack or some other tasks. So basically their training facility is around 50 meters by 50 meters. It's pretty large. And usually they need 10 to 12 people to be trained in the same locations with the VR headset. So they can simulate different use case, different scenarios to in the training scenario. So in that time when they choose between the Wi-Fi and private 5G, so they figure out this is I think from Tom, this is a transition between the routers, and then you don't want to see the VR headset. You see some flicking on the headset, so everything is streaming from the server. So that's why they choose private 5G. We can using 2 radio units, and then we can cover the whole area, and we can provide enough bandwidth to support 12 headsets at the same time. So they have a server room in the local area, and then they can provide a very immersive training scenario for the police officers. Another use case is I think we will see more and more maybe in the smart factory in the future. And right now, definitely, I think I agree with the idea. In the future, the smart factory may combine with multiple wireless protocols, including 5G, maybe Wi-Fi, maybe Zigbee, maybe Bluetooth. Yeah, but 5G can be one of the important wireless protocol when you have devices to cover with large moving areas. One of our customers, they're using private 5G to support their AGV. And the factory has been running for just past a year without any shutdown. And I think that's a good use case because they're using their AGV to do very high value materials moving. So they don't really think they don't really want to adopt the Wi-Fi to take any risk to get the AGV may stuck in some of the boundary between 2 routers. Yeah. So I think smart factory in the long term, private 5G can be a good use case for the smart factory as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. So the next 2 topics are really sort of gaps and what would it take to accelerate adoption. I want to talk about those. So the first of those is kind of a perspective on the major gaps that would have to be overcome before your organization would, consider a wider adoption. So however much adoption of Open RAN you've got, what would you need to do to get more? And I think maybe we'll come back down the line just the other way. So we'll start with Raymond, and then Luke, and then Tom, and then Bob. Anything you want to offer on that point? So really, this is gaps that we're seeing, or that in your case, Raymond, it would be okay. So what do I have to work the hardest on in order to satisfy what my customer is interested in, and for the operators, it's more what's the what do I need to have that I don't have that would cause me to be interested in that. So let's start.
Okay, so when I talk to the customers, I think at the beginning, before the POC, most of the time they talk about the technology, technical specs and everything, because they want just to make sure it works. Mm-hmm. It works with their applications. But when we really go from the POC to commercialization, not mentioned in Taiwan, but let's talk about outside Taiwan, because we have everything in Taiwan, but not outside Taiwan, right? So the problem will coming from the service. I think definitely, like Luke said, professional services, mm-hmm. including installations, all the issues happening, and how we can convince the customers when their IT people say, oh, when they hear about 5G, wow, it's complicated. I know Wi-Fi, I have a Wi-Fi certificate, but 5G, I don't know how to do it. I have no knowledge at all, right? What can I do? So our challenge becomes, how can I work or find a very qualified partners, system integrators. They can talk to our customers. They can provide service to our customers. And also, we need to make the whole system much user-friendly for the IT, OT people, so they are easier to take a look and manage that. I think that's for the private network part. So I think still the collaboration between the system integrators and to bring them all together facing to the customer, I think that's very important.
Sure, okay. Luke, what do you think?
Excuse me. We have evaluated Open RAN solutions from more than 10 vendors, and we have deployed Open RAN-based stations for private networks from two brands, Open RAN base stations from two brands. As we have seen from technical perspective, Open RAN's performance and quality are still lower than those of traditional RAN. And from a commercial perspective, Open RAN's cost is still higher than that of traditional RAN. And even that, from some of the quotations that we have received, Open RAN small cells are more expensive than traditional RAN macro cells. So, before Open RAN becomes on par with traditional RAN in performance and quality, and before Open RAN's cost drops to below that of traditional RAN, I'm afraid it's unlikely that we will consider wider adoption. I'm sorry.
Sure, costs more and performs worse. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Luke, for providing that information. In fact, I totally agree. Even not considering the current prices, real prices, a lot of the Open RAN presentations talk about TCO savings of 40% or 50% or more. I have never seen a valid comparison that I can look at and agree to. So I think that's a big problem, okay? And not only that, I think cost is probably the last thing that we consider, right? The first thing we consider, by the way, I'm not talking about enterprise networks anymore. From now on, I'm focusing solely on public network, the mobile network, okay? Because if Open RAN cannot succeed there, I think everybody here will be really, really, really disappointed. Just the enterprise market will not feed a lot of the Open RAN vendors and keep them sustainable. So basically today, we still see Open RAN as lacking the performance and features and functions with our current vendors. Because those are the kind of the first things we look at, not cost. The product needs to satisfy the features and functions and performance and manageability and so on before we invite the vendor in and discuss price. Okay, so let's not put the cart before the horse. So basically, the total product situation is not there at all today. Even though we have seen a lot of the progress, for example, we gradually seeing a lot of vendors starting providing massive MIMO radios and so on. So that's a good sign. But I think the key to this is already pointed out by Mr. Roger Huang's slide. Basically, integration is the top on our mind. We don't need products integrated right before the first use. We want a product to be integrated forever, continuously. Not just before we launch, we do a plug fast and things are integrated. No, that's not what we want. We want all the software releases to be in sync. We want all the features to be tested and vetted out. Because we don't have a big lab for doing integration testing, and we don't have hundreds of staff to do testing and interacting with vendors. That's why I said we rely on a vendor's product to be mature enough to be deployed in tier 1 vendors' networks. Because those guys have the labs, have the staff, have the time and resources to really vet things out for every release. We want a mature product all the time, not at a point of time. So I think this is the key problem, I think, that needs to be addressed, right? So the Open RAN model, the architecture separates by open interfaces the CU, DU, and RU. So theoretically, you could have X vendors for CU, Y vendors for DU, and Z vendors for RU. And then you have X multiplied by Y multiplied by Z combinations. That's not what we want. We want vendor selections, but we want integrated end-to-end software. Okay, so basically today we have two selections, Nokia and Ericsson, and maybe Samsung, right? In our last 5G auction, bid, sorry, we had 3 vendors coming. That's more than enough for us. We don't want 15 guys coming to bid. That would be chaos. Okay, so I think the Open RAN model cut things sort of this way, CU, DU, and RU. I think a more interesting model would be cutting horizontally. Maybe we can have one integrated end-to-end software solution running on top of the CU, DU, and RU hardware. That might be a more acceptable solution to us because we don't need X times Y times Z. At most, we want +1 or +2. That's all we want. So I think the Open RAN deployment and the development of the whole market sort of is going that way. That's why we have single vendor Open RAN deployments. Why? I think that speaks a lot to what the operators have in mind.
Sure, thank you very much for that perspective. I was going to ask you guys again a follow-up question on that one, which would be, what is the universe of equipment that you're able to look at? Are you looking at the worldwide offerings, or is it focused in particular areas? But I'll give Mr. Stevenson a chance to comment if he has anything to add, and then I'll let you guys.
I'm not a public cell phone provider. I've got a very bespoke set of solutions, and I'm actually quite happy with what I got from it in terms. And I'll go back to my initial comment on security, and mindful of the fact that what the Open RAN architecture enabled us to do was to build it around a security architecture to build a telephone network that we could secure using basically zero trust, not only at the application layer but down in the control planes, and perhaps and we did end up with a large scale integrator that had a lab, and we were quite happy with it. I guess so. Then I can say it was Dish, and we've got two instances running. One of them's is designed to run in pretty austere conditions, but for a specific purpose, where we have to go into an area and establish a network where there is none. So I think the people that were ultimately selected to be the providers were able to work within Open RAN and add the security to it. And I don't know if commercial providers need the bespoke security that we need, but I'm pretty happy with it, frankly, in terms of performance, cost. I think security is something we just have to factor in, because the one thing I've learned from my experience is it's a lot. At the end run, it's easier to design security in, and when you build it, whatever you're building, as opposed to go back and put it in later. So I'm quite happy with it in our use cases. But again, I'm not providing a public network. I have some very specific performance requirements to do, and again, it's got to be secure, because if it isn't, for me, it rapidly becomes a problem. But I can see, having a large scale integrator is helpful, and it helps bring that, because we had. I'm trying to remember the number of vendors that we had. That I think we had several that we brought together, hardware and software, and having getting that kind of integration. All the things you talk about you need for an end product, we needed the same thing too. We just bought it that way.
Yeah, essentially what you're saying is that you had someone put it together for you.
We
and
did.
that's what Tom was saying as well, which is I need somebody to put it together for me. I don't need 15
Yeah, and
individual pieces.
I think that market space will allow people, because we could go, we could get like, we weren't, sometimes when you go to one person, you buy the whole thing, they have their strengths and weaknesses, and we were able to select things we want. The fastest processors, certain feature sets that we could go pick and put it together for our very specific purposes. But I'm as a government user, I'm really interested in open standards, because having open standards is really critical, really key to doing cybersecurity. Because if you're not stuck with a proprietary solution, you can dive into it. You can we're able to understand how it works. We can evaluate it against known threats and things like that. And in a situation where the security and availability of the network is your prime directive, that's a highly desirable feature for me.
Mm-hmm. So that's been a very interesting set of remarks on this. And I think there's some commonality that you can take from it, which is an end-to-end solution that meets your need, however that's assembled from. But somebody needs to put it together for you to do that. And well, I won't editorialize. I have some more interesting question topics on our list, and the next one is probably this multi-vendor versus single vendor point that's been brought up a couple of times, and it came up in the talk previous to this panel, which was you can construct an Open RAN solution. A single vendor can construct an Open RAN solution, or you can have a solution that has individual solutions from different vendors. I think this was the X times Y times Z point that was made. The question is sort of how important is the multi-vendor Open RAN architecture relative to the open modular element of the architecture in your views? So we'll let whoever wants to jump in and comment on that one first.
Well, I'll start. I think the modular part is more important than the vendor, but again, repeating my comment previously, is that a lot of times we find is that certain people do some things really well. It's really, really well, and other people do other things really well. And the optimal solution, when you're looking to get the best, to bring the different pieces together. Some places, it's just it gets to replaceability, because I deal year in and year out with technological obsolescence, and it's usually driven by, it goes back to cybersecurity, because once a product reaches end of life, if there's somebody that's not supporting the software maintenance of it, it can't be in our network, so we have to replace it. So the more modular it is, the easier it is for me to do that. The less modular it is, it becomes a big problem. One of my particular problems, not yours, is aircraft radios. We bought a bunch of fourth generation fighters. The radios are integrated into the mission system on the airplane. So if I have to upgrade a component in a radio, I have to replace the entire flight control system on the aircraft. That is ridiculously expensive and time consuming, because you have to recertify the whole aircraft for flight. So we like modularity, that as you have components that are reaching end of life, if you can swap them out away, you can keep current with your cyber defense and not have to constantly replace the whole system, because that becomes untenable.
Sure. Any remarks from anyone else on the panel who wants to offer a remark on that?
Yeah, from our experience, actually, this is a multi-vendor architecture. It is good in some scenarios. During COVID time, when we have some issues to find the proper server, since it is like you are capable to work with different vendors, so we still able to source the server, even in different period. Sometimes this server, this vendor, they don't have stock. Sometimes vendor they don't have stock, so I can choose from different vendors. But also, I think I agree, like it's not really a plug and play kind of a scenario. You can just bring everything together and make sure it works. Most of the time, we have our working partners. Maybe for each modules, it's like 2 or 3 vendors. We need to really test it, and then we have the proper combination to provide to the system integrators or even to the customers. So that one we can guarantee the overall performance, stability, reliability is good enough. So I think it's very important, like the system integrators, how they deliver the system to the customers. They definitely can have multiple vendors, but not everyone, right? Maybe each module they can have 1 or 2 or 3 selections, but with the finite combinations, they can test it, they can deliver a really quality service and product to the customers.
Okay. Any other? You guys have something you want to offer on that?
The Open RAN-based stations that we have deployed are of multi-vendor architecture already. But we are not the one to pick components from multiple vendors and do the integration. When we use Open RAN, we work with system integrators. They provide us with end-to-end integrated Open RAN-based stations. It is expected that multi-vendor Open RAN will help operators get away with vendor lock-in and eventually make operators enjoy the lowest possible total cost of ownership. From our experience, although it's limited, we have not seen things go that way. As I just mentioned, Open RAN is still more expensive than traditional RAN, right? And in real operations in the field, when there are problems between, in your words, vendor X's CUDU and the vendor Y's front-haul multiplexers and vendor Z's RUs, then vendors finger point at each other. And it takes a very long time to fix. So at the end, the total cost is actually higher. A multi-vendor integration of Open RAN requires a lot of efforts. We don't have the capability and capacity yet. And given that it's not time yet for us to consider wider adoption, so we have no plan to develop those capabilities at this moment.
Okay. Tom, do you want to bring it in, bring it home?
So multi-vendor is definitely better than single vendor. Don't get me wrong. Okay, because with multi-vendors in an ecosystem, the ecosystem can be healthy and long-lasting. But what I just said was that as an operator, I don't want to face all the vendors. I want to face one integrator. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so I think the developments in the world in terms of ORAN actually are going sort of in this direction. A lot of the deployments are put together by a major operator and a major integrator that put pieces of solutions together. And there are also existing vendors like Ericsson and Nokia announcing that they're going to open up the interfaces. So at the end, I think the Open RAN spec is good because it allowed a lot of the pieces to be done by the best in breed. But it is necessary for the ORAN development, but not sufficient. So that's the key point I want to bring to you, okay? So because interface specs don't talk a lot about what's running on top of the elements. And that's more important to us. And the integration and seamlessly end-to-end operations is what we want. So I think the trend that we observe in the world sort of is going this way because in order to get to N, you need to go from 0 to 1. And in the past few years, we are experiencing the birth pain of that 0 to 1 process. But I think with those deployments being integrated and so on, and I think the integrator can further look for enrichment of its product line. And maybe approaching other operators and customers and so on. So I think it's a slow process, but this is the way it is, right? There's basically no way to fast track it. So basically, I think we need to sit through this process and watch grass grow.
So I got one closing. We're going to wrap it up here. We're going to bring it home. So if there was one thing that you could say to the Open RAN community, which is here before us, that would make the biggest difference to you in terms of a greater adoption or interest, what would that be? If someone were to call you on the phone and say, "Hey, and they said something, and you said, "I need you to come talk to me about that. I'm very interested in that." What would be that one thing? We'll start with maybe Mr. Stevenson and just go right on down the line here. If you've got anything you'd like to offer.
Well, I think it comes with, for me, for vendors, it's like bring your cybersecurity with you. Come with accreditation.
Okay.
We would beat a path to your door. We went on the journey with accreditation with our partners. It takes a while, and that's really the big entry. Assuming everything else being equal, the guy that shows up with cybersecurity wins.
Okay, that's good. And we'll just take it right down the line here.
So I spoke a lot of times before, basically just a fully integrated end-to-end product forever.
Okay. I like the forever part at the end. That's really good. That's really good. All right, Luke.
Call me when that happens.
Okay, just a word for all the friends in this Open RAN industry in Taiwan. I just talked a lot about private networks, but I think for Open RAN industries to survive, for so many vendors to survive, the chance is in public networks. Don't think that private networks are good enough for you. No, definitely not. In the previous keynote presentation, we learned about Vodafone. We learned about, later we will also learn from AT&T, right? Their focus is our public networks, not private networks. Don't get it wrong. And yesterday, one of the world's Open RAN leaders technology head, Mr. Sadayuki Abeta, right? You all know him, gave a speech at Open RAN Summit Taipei yesterday. I guess some of you were there. Their focus in Japan is public networks as well. So don't think private networks are enough. No, definitely not. Sorry.
Okay.
I think the word I'm thinking the Open RAN is flexibility. I think it's the different use case and different scenario, even for the future, for the advanced technology. When you're looking for the different protocol, different G, I think with the Open RAN community, there's some new idea, new initiative. Definitely the Open RAN community probably the most flexible. You can find some kind of team or company to work with you. And the last word I can talk to Bob is we just do some deep integration with Zscaler because we also focus in cybersecurity quite a lot.
All right. See, he's thinking. All right. Well, I think we've all got some things to think about. So we'll say thank you to the panelists. Please give the panelists a round of applause for participating.
Thank you very much to Dr. Woodward for moderating the session for us, and thank you to all the panelists. Again, we invite you to take a group photo on the stage to remember this session. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a coffee break.